whereas, once you get outside of those showers, it's maybe 20 miles per hour. And so that's the kind of difference we're talking about, and we're going to see a lot of this today, off and on. Not a steady, sort of prolonged steady wind and rain. It is going to be coming bursts with showers and gusty winds from time to time. Let me take us a little bit farther to the south, where actually the core of Eta is, and that is right down in there. A fairly broad circulation. The hurricane hunters have been in there flying in and out, giving us a sense that those strong winds are kind of pretty far removed from probably where the area of lowest pressure is. And that's a sign that couple things. One, that it may take a little while to strengthen quickly, if it ever does. And the other thing, too, is it's spreading the influence far and wide. So as we just showed you in Fort Lauderdale, we're getting, from time to time, wind gusts of 40 to 60 miles per hour. And that's going to be the case even though the center of circulation is way to the south, just off the Cuban coast. Here's some of the observations now across South Florida, and we'll have much more on this and the forecast track of Eta coming up right after the break.
It takes a relentless...
And welcome back into the Weather Channel's continuing live coverage all day, guys, by the way, as we monitor the latest now tropical storm Eta, South Florida, bearing the brunt, and will continue to do so. We've got tropical storm warnings up and also hurricane warnings. Hurricane warnings for the Keys, and then hurricane watches for parts of the southern peninsula, from Naples, Collier County, all the way back into Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and West Palm Beach. Because of that potential, we could see a strengthening storm. Perhaps, not a guarantee, but perhaps, and also some of those stronger gusts over hurricane strength. I'm meteorologist Chris Bruin here in downtown Fort Lauderdale, joined alongside our hurricane expert, Dr. Greg Postel, and also meteorologist Paul Goodlow in studio, monitoring the latest information from the National Hurricane Center, the radar, and the latest on warnings and advisories here as we monitor Eta continuing to churn closer and closer into South Florida. All right, so here's where we go from here. We just had a big squall come through, and thankfully it's not long lasting. So we're not dealing with, say, tropical storm conditions all the time. At times, it'll quickly gust over 45 miles per hour. Might take you by surprise, especially if you're driving. You've got 8 lanes on I-95. That can be a real troublesome spot if you're driving in situations like these. So travel not recommended. You're certainly going to have big time delays, even possible cancellations at all the area airports. So you want to call ahead, especially if you're trying to catch a flight into or out of Fort Lauderdale, Miami, or even Palm Beach, and certainly Key West. And where do we go from here? Heavy rainfall will continue to be our biggest threat. Flood watches are up, and strong gusts from time to time, especially increasing as we go towards this evening, Paul, maybe upwards of 50 to 60 plus miles per hour.
Yeah, definitely something we have to watch because, again, that center is emerging off the coast, and that means, again, strengthening is expected, and we could be dealing with yet another hurricane, or Hurricane Eta, approaching the U.S. Right now, that center now continues to push off the northern coast of Cuba. As it does so, it's back over the waters here, but we're still seeing that circulation going to bring more and more moisture across not only the Bahamas, but also across South Florida, and eventually even maybe Western Florida in a couple of days. So do not sleep on this thing at all. It's kind of show you the particulars. It was a 60-mile-per-hour wind, but now that's moving off of land. It's kind of gathering speed here. Now a 65-mile-per-hour tropical storm here, only 9 miles per hour away from becoming a hurricane. It's moving north now, and as it's emerging, we still see all the cloud structure. And also notice how some of the bright colors, some of the reds, dissipated as it moved over the land over Cuba. And now we're starting to see some bright colors again as that center is starting to reorganize and the storm is strengthening once again. This is a tough map to kind of look at, see what in the world is going on here. This is the forecast of the National Hurricane Center of where Eta is going, where the center is going. And that center takes it north, then towards the northwest, then more towards the west as we head on towards overnight and tomorrow morning. But look at the speeds. strengthen to a 70-mile-per-hour tropical storm later on this evening, and then into a hurricane early tomorrow morning, then maintaining hurricane strength as it moves west towards the Gulf. Maybe it's moving towards the Yucatan, but then moves more towards the north, then the northeast, then back on towards the west coast of Florida here. So I'm saying if you're anywhere here in Florida, be on alert here, but also impacts will be felt on the East Coast, and impacts will be felt in Georgia here as we head into this week. And by the way, this is Masters Week. We could be dealing with tropical weather impacting this year's Masters, which is being played this week because of COVID versus being played in traditional April timeframe. So we have a good chunk of watches and warnings up here for South Florida, tropical storm warnings, but also the Keys now upgraded to hurricane warnings. There's still a hurricane watch for other areas of South Florida because of the impacts expected over the next 36 hours. Storm surge warning as well for the Keys here. Storm surge watch in other areas of South and Southwest Florida because we're going to see the entire system kind of bring up the ocean and push it farther inland. Parts of South Florida and the Keys prone to storm surge, and we'll see that as we head over the next 36 hours. Let's talk about the impacts we're seeing now. Go back to Dr. Postel. We have some pretty interesting tower cams right now.
Yeah, let's have a look at these of what's going on right now in South Florida. Lauderdale by the sea, 77 degrees, kind of windy, breezy, cloudy conditions. But when those squalls come in off the Atlantic, the wind speed picks up by quite a bit and gets a bit testy out there, so to speak. Miami, you can see on the top right, Fort Lauderdale left, Virginia Key to the right, all experiencing roughly the same kind of weather, not all at once, the same time, but off and on, we're getting the same flavor across the region. Let's have a look at the radar to show you what I mean. Pretty much everywhere from Boca down through Fort Lauderdale, Miami, all the way through the Keys. When these heavier showers roll in, you could see wind gusts of 50 to 60 miles per hour, and we have seen that this morning so far. Now, the average wind is quite a bit less than that. It's maybe 20 to 30. And we're not really dealing with widespread tropical storm force conditions where you'd need to have that average wind closer and above 40 miles per hour. That's not the case. It's more of a gusty thing right now on the edge of Eta, which is a couple hundred miles away, believe it or not, all the way here now just off the coast of Cuba. And right in there, we think, is where the circulation center is. And it's hard to tell with some radar attenuation, I'm sure, ongoing here. But the hurricane hunters are in there. They've been finding a fairly strong tropical storm all morning long, and it's a fairly broad system as well. Some of the strongest winds may be out well away from where the center of circulation is, even on the north and right now even on the west side. So that's something to consider, that because of the nature of the storm, with the jet stream influencing it quite a bit, the impacts will be spread far and wide, as you can see already in South Florida, but some of the strongest winds, in fact, maybe not real close into the center. Think about that, at least for now. We'll see if that changes. And if this gets out over the Gulf of Mexico and strengthens, that could change. That could concentrate everything near the center more effectively. But for right now, we're dealing with pretty messy weather. Find your spot on the map. Again, lots of 40-plus mile-per-hour wind gusts in Central and South Florida. And even in North Florida, the weather is much better, but from time to time, we're getting showers roll in off the Atlantic with gusty winds, big waves, and some coastal flooding likely. But let me take you ahead and show you what might happen over the Gulf of Mexico. So right now, it is captured essentially by the jet stream. There's plenty of wind shear over Eta, which is why, as I explained, the weather is extending a great distance from the center. That's now, but let's go from now. You can see that jet stream kind of wrapped around it like that, going into early next week. Looky here. All of a sudden, by early Wednesday, the wind shear, according to the forecast, backs off a little bit. We'll see what's left of Eta, but you know it's expected to be a hurricane. How strong will it get by the time it moves over the southeastern part of the Gulf of Mexico? I want to point out that it is that time frame when the wind shear backs off that the models right in here suggest that, yeah, maybe there is that window for it to strengthen. The models do suggest that no matter what intensity it gets, the strongest it will likely be in that time frame, Tuesday and Wednesday, over the southeastern Gulf when the wind shear backs off. And again, there's a lot of uncertainty clearly as to how strong it might be, but some models suggest certainly a hurricane and maybe even above a Category 1, something to consider. Chris, back to you.
Yeah, and Dr. Postel, you know, those gusts could be hurricane strength even not necessarily near the center. So we could have over 60 to nearly 70 plus mile per hour winds, and some of those squalls that come through later today, overnight, and throughout the day tomorrow for parts of the Upper Keys, getting into Miami-Dade, also Broward, even Palm Beach counties. I think south of Palm Beach is where you're going to have the strongest winds, especially around Fort Lauderdale, Miami, of course, and then into Key Largo, and certainly all of the Keys going forward, especially as that core really moves north and starts to reorganize. All right, thanks for that update there, Dr. Postel. Let's talk about where we go from here and how much rain we may see, because that's really, I think, going to be the biggest story when we look at Eta overall and its impacts to South Florida. First off, it's already been a wet year. Here in Fort Lauderdale, surpluses are over 20 inches. We have already seen 4.5 inches of rainfall by radar estimations, and the rain is still coming down. We got a lot of it still to go as we go into the next 24, 48, even 72 hours. I mean, rain in the forecast pretty much all the way through the mid to end part of the week. And a quick look at the radar, and then we'll take you into the future radar. So timing this out, you can see how things, now this is just one model's depiction, but notice where you get that persistent east wind. It's bringing in deep tropical moisture right on in to southeast Florida. That's why we think the risk for flash flooding and certainly flooding is highest for parts of the eastern half of the state, south of the Treasure Coast, so Palm Beach, down to Broward and Miami-Dade counties, and then into parts of the Upper Keys. That's where the heaviest rainfall will be, and we think the highest rainfall totals. But we'll watch that moisture then spread into southwest Florida overnight tonight, and especially throughout the day tomorrow. That's when you're going to start getting in on those tropical storm force gusts. So Dr. Postel, walk us through the other aspects of this storm. We know rainfall, the biggest aspect. Wind will be a factor, certainly, and could even be more of a factor if this strengthens. What about beach factors? Are we going to see storm surge and coastal flooding?
Yeah, Chris, we will. And storms, if we haven't already, we're seeing some water rises, no doubt about that, with that prolonged east wind. But storm surge warnings are also something you hear a lot from us during hurricane season. And now our Kelly Cass explains how storm surge is generated and what kind of danger storm surge poses to you, your family, and your property.
Storm surge, it's a term that you hear with almost every hurricane. It's associated with high winds, crashing waves, and flooding. As a storm approaches the coast, the ocean floor becomes more shallow and water being pushed by strong winds begins to pile up. Higher storm surge occurs when there is a wide, gently sloping ocean floor, while lower storm surge occurs with narrow, steeply sloped floors. Areas along the Gulf Coast, especially Louisiana and Mississippi, are particularly vulnerable to storm surge because the ocean floor gradually deepens offshore. Conversely, areas such as the east coast of Florida, where the ocean floor is steeper, tends to have less of a storm surge. It's important to be aware of all the dangers. Don't take unnecessary risks. Conditions can change in the blink of an eye. Listen to your local emergency management, and when they tell you to leave, get out. Learn where your evacuation routes are, and if you have to evacuate, move quickly so you don't get stuck in the rush. Stay alert and stay safe.
Kelly, thank you very much for that. Now, we are going to be dealing with water rises, coastal flooding, storm surge as well, and also some pretty ugly weather across the region. You can see right now a lot of rain and a lot of wind moving across South Florida right now. Winds are generally on average about 20 to 30. But when some of these stronger rain squalls move through, we're seeing wind gusts of 50 to even 60 miles per hour. That is something to consider and something that we're going to be contending with not just this morning and afternoon, but likely through tonight and early tomorrow at least. This is eventually going to be a long duration event. We'll have to watch for days yet to come. Storm surge. We got a significant amount of water rise we expect across the entire east coast of Florida, all the way even from southern Georgia down through parts of central and southern Florida. Find your spot on the map. A couple of feet, no problem of getting some water rises. Think about that as like a water rise above normally dry ground. Like, let's just say the tip of the high tide mark on average. It's a little bit more complicated than that, but find that place and put a couple of feet of water above that, and that's the kind of water rise we're talking about also in the Florida Keys as well. So this is going to be, again, a fairly significant event that is going to take a while to unfold. Here's what I mean by that. You can see the cone. We've shown this over and over again. It moves westward over the Gulf of Mexico. And when it does, it's got a shot at being stronger than the forecast shown here. We know that. That's part of the uncertainty in the intensity forecast, which is very difficult to sort out now. But the big thing, Paul, and you've been talking about this a lot as well, is how long we're going to be dealing with Eta. The forecast, the official forecast from the Hurricane Center has Eta still with us over the Gulf on Friday, this entire week, and it's not done yet. Paul, back to you.
Some models say then it moves back toward the west and doesn't make landfall in northwestern Florida. So, you know, stay tuned. I hate to say that, but true, the models are all over the place on this. But yeah, one thing we do know, impacts being felt right now from the Florida Keys right on through southwest Florida, South Florida, many cities under a state of emergency right now. They're waiting for the strongest part of Eta to arrive, but also plenty of wind. This tropical storm forecast to become a hurricane as it moves most likely over or pretty much near the Keys over the next 24 hours here. So impacts. Don't get caught up in the center. Get caught up where the weather is with this system. And the Keys, more rain continues tonight, tomorrow into Tuesday as well. 2 to 3 inches of rain easily coming down there, if not more. This one model kind of shows the kind of bands of rain spiraling in across South Florida and even the Keys as well. And then we have that center. This model's forecasting that center to come across the upper Keys as we head on towards late tonight into early tomorrow morning. And that's its representation of the center. But still, look at all the weather. We're seeing weather well up through the Palm Beaches, down through the Keys, even in Key West, as that moves westward into the Gulf of Mexico. The impacts, the weather, the rain, still being funneled into areas of South Florida. This counterclockwise rotation, we're getting inundated not only with the rain, but also with some surge and some wave action and the onshore flow here. Good news is not the best beach days, but if you are at the beach and it is raining, the ocean is going to be kind of a tempest. It's going to be increased rip current risk as well. But a couple of inches of rain, maybe a half foot in some localized areas in terms of storm total here. Miami as well. More wind continues tonight and tomorrow into your Tuesday, and we could see a couple of inches of rain here. Not to mention, if you flood with king tides here in Miami, you're going to see flooding with this system moving on by here. Fort Myers. Well, you might not see a lot of rain until we head late tonight as that low gets closer to you. More of this rain making its way into southwestern Florida, and we could see a couple of inches of rain, although this area of Florida, we could actually use some more rain. So that's some good news for you. And even Tampa, we could have a couple of inches of rain here as we head on to the beginning of this week. Hey, we'll stay with the Weather Channel all day long. We have all-day coverage as we track Eta.
I drive.
Hurricane season doesn't stop for a pandemic, and neither do we. Get the information you need to stay safe every day, right here on the Weather Channel.
Let's get you up to speed on what we know right now on Eta. Eta is expected to strengthen into a hurricane. If you're just joining us this morning, that's some new information. National Hurricane Center expecting that strengthening in the next couple of days. Hurricane and storm surge warnings issued for the Florida Keys. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has declared a state of emergency in 8 counties in South Florida. It does include Broward, Miami-Dade, and Monroe. And officials living in Monroe County encourage those living in mobile homes, also on boats and in similar units, to take shelter in sturdy buildings by 5 p.m. this evening. So that is important information, and you want to not be on a boat to ride out this storm. Too many people do that in the past. It's just dangerous, okay? Let's take you live to our exclusive storm path camera here in Fort Lauderdale. This one's right on the Atlantic, right at the beach overlooking the intercoastal and back towards downtown Fort Lauderdale. You can even hear the wind. Nice steady gusts there right on the beach. High waves, not a good day to be at the beach at all. In fact, most people, the streets are pretty much empty from runners and beachgoers, pretty much a washout of a day. And now here in downtown Fort Lauderdale around the new river, it's about 4 miles away from that exact location that you were just looking at. We're just dealing with some light showers. Now we've had some stronger gusts and squalls come through earlier, but that's the exact nature that we've been seeing. They come and they go. I want to pull up the radar and show you kind of where we go from here. Look at the moisture that still has to work its way in. I mean, it's never ending, it seems like, coming off of the Atlantic, and that's that complete tropical flow on the outer fringes of Eta that's continuing to funnel in. That's why Broward County has really dealt with some of the heaviest rainfall so far. You have a couple of inches that we've been seeing in Miami up to this point, also into Palm Beach County where some heavy squalls are pushing in at the moment. And this will continue to be the theme. In fact, I think become more persistent as we head into this evening and certainly overnight tonight, especially down towards the Keys, but also here into southeast Florida. Rainfall estimations have been anywhere from 3 to over 4.5 inches. That's just for the last 24 hours. And wind speeds, current winds have gusted well over 40 to 50 miles per hour. We even had a 60-mile-per-hour gust reported here in Fort Lauderdale earlier today. The gusts have come down, and again, those are gusts, not sustained winds. But a steady east breeze continuing to keep that moisture right off the Atlantic into South Florida, keep us wet today, and winds easily 20 to 30 miles per hour with gusts much higher than that and increasing after we go there through that point. We got full round-the-clock coverage right here on the Weather Channel all day long with crews from Fort Lauderdale, where I am, all the way down to the Keys. So keep it right here to the Weather Channel for the latest updates when it comes to Tropical Storm Eta and South Florida effects. Paul?
It's National STEM Day, so we want to celebrate science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And according to a Pew Research Center analysis of the U.S. Census Bureau, the number of STEM jobs has grown by 79% since 1990. Several people are getting in on today's celebration, including WonderWorks. They've launched their new I Think, Therefore I STEM program. And Carenza Archer joins us now with details this morning. Thanks for joining us again here. Let's talk about this program. So what does this program offer?
So we are celebrating STEM Day in two different ways. We are celebrating with the debut of our new STEM exhibit, and also a special day just to have some interactive, some live learning labs where families can come and experience things like density and force versus pressure. The sodas that we drink, some of them float, some of them sink, some of them have a lighter density than water, and some a bigger density. So just some fun things today, electricity as well. So we're having a lot of fun with it today.
Yeah, a lot of great stuff for kids and families. So what's the motivation behind creating these programs and exhibits?
The motivation behind it is because we are a fun, educational place to come and just enjoy your day and enjoy your friends or family. The motivation behind something like this is while you're playing and you maybe learn something along the way, because everything has an educational aspect in our building, you're also getting to find out that there are some careers in the things that you are enjoying. And we are debuting different STEM careers at different times. Our opening of this exhibit, we are debuting being a NASA astronaut, and there's some interactive components as well.
So women are underrepresented in some STEM clusters, but in others they kind of match or exceed their share in the U.S. workforce overall. So how is WonderWorks influencing young girls to explore STEM careers?
Well, this is really a great place, not only for the young ages, but for all ages to experience those things. As an adult, you may revisit some of those science things that you have learned about before, like, experiencing hurricane winds, or maybe you've never experienced an earthquake. Well, you can experience an earthquake simulation here, or actually lay on a bed of nails. So it's really something that is for everybody. And we do have some special things that are interactive in our exhibit where you can find out, is there a special height? Is there anything about vision? Are there special languages, anything like that about being an astronaut that you would want to know?
Great information. Carenza Archer with WonderWorks, thanks for joining us there from Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. Right now, we're still tracking what's going on in South Florida with Tropical Storm Eta forecast to become a hurricane. Here's a live look at the Intercoastal Waterway here at Fort Lauderdale. More rain continues throughout your Sunday.
We got some new video into us here from the Weather Channel. This is from Pembroke Pines. That's just to our west of Fort Lauderdale and Hollywood. You can see heavy rains, some of the squalls that we're seeing all across southeast Florida and the Keys overnight and this morning and now continuing into this afternoon. Expect on and off spurts of this exact scene. In fact, picking up in intensity, we think, especially as we head into this evening and overnight tonight through today, tomorrow. So from there, we're going to continue to follow what's going on. I'm live in downtown Fort Lauderdale, where we are monitoring the latest conditions here with Tropical Storm Eta. It has been a wet go of it, guys, in the last 24 hours. Already seeing rainfall totals here, especially in Broward County, closing in on 5 inches, and it is still raining. We got a lot of moisture still to have to get through. I want to show you briefly kind of what it looks like here off in the distance, and you can clearly see, at times those gusts will pick up, but again, they don't last all that long. It's really as that rain comes in. Rain will tamper down a little bit, and then it'll pick back up and kind of go off and on. That will continue to be a trend, but when it picks up heavy, look at the heavy puddles that you get here. This is what we talk about when we say urbanized flooding. Now, low-lying areas, so like on this sidewalk, you got a little divot, and there's a lot of roads and neighborhoods that look just like this. This is where it collects the water, and if the rainfall rate lasts hard enough, that's when you have that flooding, and we've already seen that in pockets, especially as those bands come in neighborhoods around downtown Fort Lauderdale, the northeast part of the community near Las Olas, and then working your way up towards Broward Boulevard and then back towards Fort Lauderdale Beach. And you can get a kind of idea of what street conditions look like here. It'll be tough for driving, especially those on the bridges and overpasses. Dr. Posey, I want to bring you in. Already in the first 24 hours, and we've seen close to a half foot of rain. That's impressive, given the fact that we still got another 2 days at least of these type of rainfall totals to get through here in southeast Florida.
Yeah, and what's interesting watching your live shot, Chris, is that right now the winds are fairly calm. They're not doing much, but just about 10 or 15 minutes ago, you had one of those rain showers move through, and the winds were jumping probably 40 to 50 miles an hour. Would you say?
All right, that's it. We're going to do our look like.
Okay, so anyway, what we're talking about is where Chris is right now near Fort Lauderdale. He's right in between some heavier rain showers where the actual weather is not that bad. But just a few minutes ago, one of these rain squalls moved through, and we saw some very gusty winds like we have all morning long. In some cases, we've seen wind gusts up to about 60 miles per hour. He was also mentioning the amount of rain that we've seen. Here's just an estimate over the last 24 hours. Some areas in and around Fort Lauderdale have seen over 4 inches, 3 to 5, in some cases even a little bit more than that. So it's a lot of rain and a lot more yet to come. And many areas in South Florida have seen way more than average rainfall this year. So more, unfortunately, coming, and flash flooding as well. This is where the center of gyration is, let's call it. Circulation is down in here. It's a fairly broad system right now. The impacts are spread a long way from the center. And given its sort of appearance, I can't tell if we've just attenuated the radar, but I do believe it's still a relatively large circulation. It might be hard for this thing to strengthen relatively quickly. Sometimes it takes a while for them to contract, if they ever do, and that would be a sign of strengthening noticeably. But right now, we're not really seeing that. The hurricane hunters have just gone home now in their most recent trip, but they'll be out there plenty more times and give us a good sense of what we're dealing with right now. The wind from the east is on average, let's say 20 to 30 miles per hour. Sometimes for extended periods, it's not doing much, but then when the rain squalls come in, it's 40 to 50, even some cases closer to 60. That's the kind of weather, certainly along the east coast of Florida, that we'll deal with today. On the west coast, the wind, the east wind, is a little bit weaker, just passing over some of the frictional effects of the land, slow it down a little bit. So that's why the Florida west coast not as windy as the east coast. But certainly all up and down the peninsula into Georgia, we're seeing some showers roll all the way around the region, Paul. And for now, the winds aloft have captured Eta, at least to some extent, with some wind shear. That's that's probably keeping its intensity in check for a little while, but we'll be watching some trends that might suggest we'll see a strengthening once it gets out over the Gulf of Mexico early next week. Paul.
Hey, Greg mentioned Eta in Georgia. They have Masters this week. Could Eta impact that? More coming up at 50 past the hour. But right now, Key West impacts. More rain continues tonight and tomorrow with some winds getting up there throughout the rest of the night. Take a look at this forecast radar here. More rain across South Florida and the Keys. This model showing that center crossing the Keys later on tonight into early Monday morning. Then it moves out towards the Gulf, where by this time it could be a hurricane, Category 1. And so bringing rain here across South Florida and the Keys.
And we expect delays to garbage and bulky waste pickup on Monday. City offices will also be closed on Monday. City of Miami parks, marinas, beaches will be closed at 5 p.m. today until further notice. And City of Miami Child Learning Centers will be closed on Monday, November 9th, due to the storm. I have just finished speaking to Superintendent Carvalho, who has informed me that Miami-Dade Public Schools will be closed tomorrow, Monday, and that bus services will not be operable. I also spoke to Mayor-elect Daniela Lavincava, who explained that the county is shutting down transportation services at 2 p.m. today, and government offices will also be closed tomorrow.
All right, that was an update from the Miami mayor stating that city offices will be closed tomorrow. No surprise there, especially given the fact we are under a hurricane watch and tropical storm warning, and we're going to be dealing with long-lasting impacts here from Eta. Beaches are closed. No reason to head out to the beach. The surf's just too dangerous. You've got huge waves just crashing up on the beach. Plus, it's a washout of a day, and will only get worse. We're expecting heavier rains and stronger winds to push in overnight and throughout the day tomorrow. Similar story here in Fort Lauderdale, where we are right now, where we've seen some of the heaviest rain in South Florida thus far, closing in on 5 inches in parts of Broward County, especially in and around Fort Lauderdale, where some of the heaviest squalls have been. I want to step to the side just a little bit and kind of show you what it looks like in between squalls. Look how fast the clouds are racing here, just above the New River. This is looking off towards the east and the Atlantic Ocean. You can see those ominous clouds. Again, another burst of rain, probably expecting to come in. As they do, they bring up those winds very quickly, and that's when you get the palm trees to really, be rattled. And if you're on a bridge, if you're traveling Interstate 95, U.S. Highway 1, that can be a problem. Sustained winds, 20, 30 miles per hour, but those gusts will get you and could catch you by surprise. Let's show you the radar. There we go. Right on cue, right? Those clouds pushed in, winds are picking up. And there we go with the rain starting to pick up just a little bit. The radar showing you some of those intense bands stretching from, say, Vero Beach, the couple areas of squalls, even that far north, and especially continuing to plummet areas around Palm Beach and Broward County. Miami South has been a little quieter, but we've got a whole surge of moisture that will continue, especially as that core reorganizes and the storm tries to take on more, better organization and restructure itself. We're going to get more of those persistent tropical storm force gusts and heavy rains, which is something we're going to be monitoring here very closely. Of course, we've got crews up and down the southeast coast into the Keys to keep you and your family safe with the latest real-time updates as Eta churns closer. We know flash flooding and strong winds are going to be as biggest impacts here for the next several days in South Florida. Paul?
Here's a good thing this year. NASA is actually celebrating the 20th anniversary of the International Space Station. Humans have inhabited the outpost continuously since November 2nd, 2000. It took until 2011 to completely build out the station. And over the past 2 decades, the ISS has hosted 241 individuals from 19 countries. Together, they've carried out 221 spacewalks and more than 3,000 different scientific projects. It all helps life here on Earth as well. Let's talk about the ISS and its accomplishments with astrophysicist Dr. Paul Sutter. He's with Stony Brook University and the Flatiron Institute. Thanks for joining us this morning from New York City. So question was, looking back over the last 20 years, broadly speaking, what do you think the ISS has really achieved for humanity since move-in day 20 years ago?
Right. That's a fantastic question. Just the fact that the space station has been with us for so long, for 2 decades, like the space station is old enough to vote. That's how long it's been. And it's been continuously inhabited that entire time. This is where humanity is learning how to live and work in space for extended periods of time, which is exactly what we need to do if we want to push further to the moon, Mars, and even more.
And women have made some strides as well here at the ISS. Got the first female commander in 2007 and the first all-woman spacewalk in 2019.
Yeah, this is an opportunity because, again, because of the longevity of the space station, we can introduce a lot more diversity in the people we are sending up. And so it's not just the same stereotypical images over and over again. And we can get more experiences there. We can get more variety there, and we can get more people up. This is just absolutely fantastic.
And initially, the space shuttles would bring astronauts up until 2011 when that fleet was retired. But now, until this year, we now have a private company, SpaceX, involved. That's also kind of landmark terrain.
Oh, yeah, this is absolutely huge. Earlier this year in June, a private company, SpaceX, designed, built, launched, and sent astronauts to the space station and then brought them back safely to Earth, which is a very important part. All with private money. This is a new chapter in space exploration that we have just opened.
And also, I guess something else which is new, there's an espresso machine now on the ISS.
Yes. So when the Italians sent their astronaut Samantha Cristoforetti up, they said, well, of course, if we're going to send an Italian into space, she needs her espresso. This is vital. And so there is a custom-built espresso machine called the IS Espresso machine. and it seems silly, but we are trying to get people to live and work with comfort in space. And so it's exactly this is what we need.
Sounds fantastic. It's astrophysicist Paul Sutter joining us from New York City.
What kind of value are you looking for with your next?
Some recommendations for those who are preparing for the hurricane right now. We're asking you to have at least 1 gallon of water per person, to have at least 3 days of non-perishable foods, to have flashlights available in case of power outages, to charge your cell phone and also have battery backups for your cell phone, to keep a first aid kit at home, to know your evacuation plan, pick a destination and travel routes ahead of the storm, and also let your family members know of what that plan is. Take out necessary amounts of cash, keep your insurance policies, documents, and other valuables in a safety box, and make copies to place in a waterproof container.
All right, those are words from Miami Mayor Francis Suarez, letting people know how to prepare as we await Eta's arrival. Now, already seen impacts already from Fort Lauderdale to Miami into the Keys and across southeast Florida, and that will only intensify as we go from here on out. So for the remainder of the day, expect on and off rain bands and squalls from the outer fringes and really just the moisture source of Tropical Storm Eta. Those gusts will pick up, and we expect them to be over tropical storm force. We've already had reports of 48, even a 60-mile-per-hour wind gust here in Fort Lauderdale over the last 24 hours, and that will only get worse. I want to show you our exclusive storm path camera live atop the Fort Lauderdale beach, looking back towards the intercoastal. You can see we're in a little bit of a lull. We had a squall come through earlier. We caught this all on camera. You weren't even able to see the skyline just because of how low the visibility, how heavy the rain was. That has since improved, but we'll expect more of those to continue. We've got live team coverage all day here on the Weather Channel from Fort Lauderdale down to Key Largo, where Jen Carfagno will pick up here in a few minutes, and then spreading into the Keys, where we'll continue to monitor the latest here on Eta. I want to bring in our hurricane expert, Dr. Greg Postel. Now, what are you tracking? Any updates, any strengthening, or any signs of weakening, perhaps, of Eta?
No, I think steady as she goes for now, Chris. Those are great questions, but I do think the weather where you are in particular is going to get worse, sort of stair-stepping our way toward worse conditions. In other words, it's not going to be a steady ramp up, but you see a rain band out here, another one out here. As those come in to South Florida, they will likely each with them bring some gusty winds over 50 miles per hour at times. And it's going to be kind of this up and down thing, not this steady progression of deterioration, but it is going to get worse and then better and then worse even still and then better, sort of up and down that we go. Rainfall will be very significant, and that might end up being by far the biggest story. We've already got, in some places, according to radar estimates, well over 4 inches in spots. There's the legend up at the top. In some places, even more than that. And that's even just in the last 24 hours. And so there's going to be plenty of places that probably end up with over a foot of rain when we're done. The center of circulation is likely down in here somewhere. It's hard to tell. The radar is not completely filled in there. Now, whether or not because the radar echoes don't exist down there, or we're losing it with some attenuation in the radar elevation, I'm not sure. But the idea is that we've got the circulation here, and it's pretty broad. In other words, the impacts are spread pretty far out from the center. In fact, the worst weather, unlike a well-developed tropical cyclone, may be at some distance from the center, pretty far out. Right now, again, mentioned the weather is windy at times in South Florida. We've seen wind gusts of up to 60 earlier in Fort Lauderdale. 20 to 30 sustained winds or average winds are common with gusts above that. Central and North Florida, the weather's better, but that onshore wind is going to bring some coastal flooding all day today and probably for the next couple. Let me show you two last graphics. What is Eta doing right now? It is essentially captured by this upper trough, and that is, I think, holding its intensity in check with the wind shear. But look what happens going into early next week. I think the wind shear, according to the models, weakens a little bit when it's out in here, Paul, and that is precisely the time that the models indeed suggest, Tuesday to 7 to Wednesday evening, when the models suggest that if this thing is going to get stronger, that would be the most likely place and time to do it. It could even exceed some of the forecasts from the Hurricane Center, which already have it at that time as a 75-mile-per-hour hurricane.
Yeah, but models, though, they've been all over the place. Right now, we do know the weather's improving here in in Arizona for the final round of the 2020 Charles Schwab Cup Championship. Weather definitely was a factor early on, but not today. Temperatures will be in the 60s. Had some breeze conditions yesterday. See the pants leg kind of blowing there as well during yesterday's play. Champion will be selected today on this final event of the Champions Tour schedule. All right, hey, also speaking of golf, you know what happens this week? The Masters. Is it April already? No, but it was kind of pushed back, postponed, and this week, here's the forecast. Now, I'm going to tell you this right now, this forecast can dramatically change depending on what happens with Eta later on this week, but right now, as of today, the forecast for Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, a lot of moisture, a lot of tropical moisture, and pretty mild temperatures for Augusta in November, but this will definitely change in a few days.
Hi, everyone, and welcome into our special extended coverage of Tropical Storm Eta. I'm meteorologist Julie Martin, joined in studio by our storm specialist Carl Parker. We'll get to him in just a minute. First of all, hurricane warning in effect now across the Florida Keys, Key West, feeling Eta's effects of rain and wind. Live look now at Key West, where it is currently, you can see the flags there kind of blowing around in the breeze, and it is going to get even more windy, and the rain will be coming as well, so deteriorating from here. All right, we take a look currently at Tropical Storm Eta coming off the coast of Cuba. It is a 65-mile-per-hour storm, still about 145 miles southeast of Marathon, Florida, moving to the north-northwest, though, at about 17 miles per hour. So with that, we are expecting to see impacts starting to arrive here throughout the afternoon this evening in South Florida. But really, this is a storm that could last a long time. We're talking about several days, as it's expected to impact the Keys and then maybe make its way back into the Gulf of Mexico all the way through Friday of this week. So we still have a very long way to go when it comes to Eta. But right now, we do want to get out to Jen Carfagno. She is in the Florida Keys where those hurricane and storm surge warnings are now issued. And Jen, what's the current condition there for you right now?
Hey, Julie. Good afternoon to you. Now, here in the Florida Keys, we've been in and out of the showers. I am in Key Largo in the Upper Keys. And the key today is that you are going to be in and out of these showers, some with gusty winds. In fact, we've seen winds as strong as 47 miles per hour up at Cardstown Bridge, just north of here, about 10 miles north of here, just a little bit earlier this morning. And so those kind of conditions will ramp up through the day today. What's also key is where you are on the islands as to where you're going to feel some of the strongest of the winds, at least for today. I'm on the west side, actually, of Key Largo. So we're in a little more protected cove, and that's something that I want to talk about. First of all, let me run down what we have going on here. We're under a hurricane warning. Probably heard your phones go off if you live in the Florida Keys. We're under a storm surge warning as well. Tides have already been running a little high, so expecting another 1 to 2 feet on top of that with coastal inundation with saltwater flooding. We're expecting some big rain, 6 to 12 inches. That will cause rainwater flooding. And then, of course, we'll have the winds. And that's why there are some evacuations, mandatory evacuations for campgrounds and RV parks. That went into effect this morning. Visitors have to depart there. Some mobile home parks and some low elevation areas as well. And all the state parks are closed as well here today and tomorrow. Now, there are some shelters that are open. Some high schools in Key West, one in Marathon, and one in Coral Shores. And they're all pet friendly. You should know that as well. All right, so behind me, I want you to see right now the wind's obviously not that big of a factor. You can see the trees, though, a little breezy. What you're going to notice is that the wind that we have all day today is going to be mainly from the east. And that constant wind direction is honestly something that really gets you, right? The fact that you don't get a break from that wind direction at all. And then we're going to see that ramp up as we get into the afternoon and evening when we do see Eta make its approach here to the Keys. Now, I'm in an area, and let's look out over the water. I'm in an area that is somewhat protected, and I've been following real closely today this little cove area, and more boats keep coming in. Boats are hanging out here. They are here to ride out the hurricane. You know, I'm in the Florida Keys and people love their boats. Some people live on their boats here. And if you happen to be on a boat here, you want to find yourself a safe place to be. So this really is a good sort of calmer spot, I think, to ride out the storm. It happens to also be just across the way, what's called Manatee Cove. And Carl, I've seen a few manatees. I don't see one right now, but when I come back up, Carl, I'll make sure that I'm able to show you guys my little buddies that have been visiting me so far this morning or this afternoon, Carl. Yeah. But certainly watching and waiting. I mean, I haven't seen a hurricane warning here in the Keys, I think, since Irma, if I am going through those stats right.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. And, you know, that is such a beautiful area. I've been to the Keys a bunch of times, and it's just a really, really pretty part of the country. Certainly going to be a tough day today, though. Thank you, Jen, so much. And let's take a look at the latest on the storm right now. Again, it is a 65-mile-per-hour tropical storm moving north-northwest at 17. And I'll tell you, you look at the satellite presentation on this thing, and it is not very impressive right now. You notice how a lot of that brighter color, that orange and red, has gone away in the last several frames here. So the convection is actually dying down right now. Of course, there's been land interaction, but there's a lot of wind shear as well. We've seen that since last night. And so that certainly is good news. That should at least keep a lid on the intensity. It may intensify some as it's getting closer, but it's not likely to intensify rapidly. And here, from a radar perspective, we're just starting to see a little more of that rain wrapping around the core there. But you notice that banding that is now coming up towards South Florida. That is going to be where a lot of the strongest wind will be. So right now we have winds gusting to 26 in Miami and 30 in Fort Lauderdale. But as that banding comes in, we see some of the heavier showers and storms along with that. We do expect that there will be some winds gusting over 50 miles per hour. That's primarily going to be this evening and then through the overnight as well. Farther north, winds now gusting to 39 in West Palm Beach, and that wind extending fairly far to the north. We'll talk more about that in a moment. I want to show you the high-resolution model, and this is showing you all of the rain that's going to be coming through here. So we're talking about maybe double-digit rainfall in some areas, but at least 5+ across a lot of South Florida and the Keys. And so you get that much rainfall in an area where you've had saturated ground, you're going to be talking about flash flooding. That is going to be one of the big worries with this storm. Hurricane warnings in effect for Monroe County, the Keys, hurricane watches farther north, tropical storm warnings in effect all the way up to the Space Coast. So a lot of the coast is expected to get strong wind, not just because of the tropical storm, but also because of a high to the north. There's a very strong pressure gradient, very tight pressure gradient, as we say, and a lot of strong wind extending well off the north. You can really see that in this model depiction. You've got the storm itself, but then this very broad area of strong wind coming in tonight across much of central and South Florida, and well inland as well. Of course, the strongest winds are the ones that will affect the East Coast, coming off the water with no friction, but some pretty strong winds across much of the state. That finally begins to relent as we go into Tuesday afternoon. So a couple of days of really gusty wind. And then, of course, the big question is, what's going to happen after that? Are we going to see some stronger wind begin to affect the west coast of Florida? That's a possibility. We know the storm's going to sit out there for a while. It's possible that it does get stronger and becomes a hurricane when it's sitting out in the Gulf. So looking at the maximum wind potential here, you see 40+ mile per hour wind from the Space Coast and on southward. And then we get into 60+ miles per hour in Broward County, Miami-Dade County, and then hurricane force winds in southern Miami-Dade and also down across the Keys. And don't forget, we've got water piling up as well at ahead of the storm. Storm surge warning in effect in the Keys, and then we're looking at a possible water level rise of 2 to 4 feet there, and that's going to be going through tonight and tomorrow. Julie, over to you.
All right, we want to look at some of the actual timing now of your particular city and when you could be feeling those impacts. This is starting the clock here at 2 o'clock this afternoon. You'll notice this very large, wide area of yellow indicating just the broadness of the wind field here with this. So by 5 o'clock, we're looking at Key Largo, the Florida Keys into Miami-Dade. Feeling those tropical storm force winds, again, about 125 miles from the center of the storm. So really widespread wind impacts with this one. This is midnight going into Monday here, now up through Naples, West Palm, Fort Lauderdale, and so on. So we continue to see that wind field really expand and push farther to the north and northwest. Also dealing with some hurricane force winds in red here once we get into the early morning hours tomorrow. So then the storm does start to pull away by tomorrow night, again impacting still portions of the Gulf of Mexico, and that's where it's going to be sitting there for maybe a few days, but still remaining on the windy side here in Florida. So we look here at where we are likely to see the arrivals of these winds, and certainly starting this afternoon, we're going to start feeling them here in the Florida Keys, South Florida as well by this evening. By Monday morning, starts to head up the coast, the west coast of Florida. That's where we're going to be looking at these winds by the time we get into Tuesday, Tampa. You're going to be feeling the tropical storm force winds. So again, a very widespread area away from the center really of the storm. Miami, for you, does look like we will be dealing with some pretty gusty conditions starting tonight, 25 to 30 mile per hour winds, picking up a little more for you on Monday with winds gusting to 35, and Tuesday remaining very windy as well. Starting to see some improvements by Wednesday and Thursday, but we're still dealing with 15 to 20 mile per hour wind gusts. Well, the Fort Lauderdale area also preparing for Eta. Our Chris Bruin shows us what's happening there.
Heavy bursts of rain kind of come and go. We've been in these squalls all night and all morning and now afternoon here in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, where rainfall totals are really starting to rack up. Already upwards of 4 to 5 inches in Broward County, at least parts of it. And we've got a lot more rain to have to contend with, so expect more of the same. In fact, gusts getting even stronger and those winds picking up more persistent bands as we head through the overnight and evening hours. When we talk about urban flooding, this is what we mean. Take a look right here. This isn't that serious, at least at the time being, but it shows you kind of a low-lying spot on the sidewalk where that water collects. The problem is the rainfall rates. When you talk about tropical systems, you end up with 1 to 2 inch or more per hour rainfall rates. 10 minutes, that's manageable, but when it lasts for over an hour or so, you run into problems. So while the roads here, for the most part, they're drivable, you have issues when you end up with those types of rainfall rates for, say, an hour or more's time. So that means roads like this become flooded with ponding on the road. And that's what we've seen around Fort Lauderdale already, and expect that to worsen with those flood watches in effect. Winds will also be a factor. They get very strong. We get those tropical storm force gusts as those squalls come in, but expect those winds to steadily increase, especially overnight tonight and throughout the day tomorrow with more persistent rain bands, and the core of Eta gets closer to the Keys in South Florida and even re-strengthens potentially and reorganizes its overall structure. We'll continue with the latest updates here, not only from Fort Lauderdale, but all across Southeast Florida and the Keys coming up.
Thanks, Chris. You know, some models have shifted Eta's cone more to Florida's western side, putting places like Tampa more into the storm's path. Rain and gusty winds up to 30 miles an hour today set the stage for what will be a stormy week ahead, thanks to Eta. So we want to get over now to Carl. And Carl, you know, Tampa, a very vulnerable city when it comes to flooding and hurricanes.
About that, and there is going to be this potential for the storm to become a hurricane out in the Gulf if it doesn't do that prior to that time. Now, first of all, we'll begin with a look at this upper level low, that big U-shaped feature that is down across the Gulf and into the Caribbean there. And along with that, there is drier air that's coming into the southwest side of the system, so it has a very hybrid-like appearance, sort of a cross between a tropical system and a non-tropical system. And also, there are stronger winds that are now coming into the system as well. So both of those things bothering the circulation right now. We do think that that wind shear is really going to back off. So the question is, how much of that dry air is going to remain? And here you see a depiction of that upper level low there. We've got the upper level winds. We'll go forward and watch the storm as it moves out into the Gulf. And you notice that that strong upper level wind goes away basically by the time we get into Tuesday. And so it's going to be in a very light wind environment. That's why it's not going to move very much at all. But again, there could be some dry air still lurking at that time. But if it does manage to reorganize in that environment, we could very well be talking about a hurricane. But then late in the week, stronger winds come in again and will affect the system and begin to weaken it as it finally pushes in on shore. So it's possible that it's not much of a storm as it comes on shore later in the week. Now, here's a look at the model intensity guidance. You know, there is one outlier there. That's the H-WRF, as we call it. And that model tends to run a little hot, but there are several models that do take it above hurricane intensity going into the early part of next week. So it certainly is possible. Another question is, where is it going to go? We know it's going to go out into the eastern Gulf, but when is it going to start to feel that system coming in from the west and then be taken off the northeast? How far west is it going to go before that happens? If it's not that far to the west, when it finally starts to feel that approaching system and moves in, it's possible that it will move in to, say, Tampa. And some of the models are indicating that we could be looking at some gusty wind coming up here Wednesday and Thursday in the Tampa area and Bradenton, Sarasota. Here's one of our models, the European model, showing the storm moving out into the Gulf, maybe getting a little bit more organized. We still see in the modeling the impression that there's some drier air that is still bothering the system. You notice how there's a semicircle there. I'm going to go back just a few frames right in there. You see all the weather's on the east side of the circulation. So that implies that there's still a lot of dry air in the central part of the Gulf. But then the storm gradually makes its way a little farther towards the east and perhaps will come up and into Florida. So, you know, Julie, there's still some potential for some weather along the west coast after this first round. Depending on exactly where it goes, but a lot of unanswered questions, and we'll just continue to watch it closely.
All right, could be a long week there. You know, waterlogged South Florida bracing for more rain with this. Parts of the area are already 18 inches above their rainfall average for the year. So Eta could dump another 5 to 8 inches there, and that's going to start tonight, if not this afternoon. So again, looking at flooding becoming a real problem here across South Florida. We have flood watches up from Vero Beach all the way down to Miami-Dade, all the way over to Fort Myers and Naples as well. So many of you could be getting just inundated with plenty of rainfall with really already very saturated ground. Current radar showing that rain now moving across the Keys, also in across Miami right now, but looking at way more to come before Eta is said and done. We'll be back right after this.
Hurricane season doesn't stop for a pandemic, and neither do we. Get the information you need to stay safe every day, right here on the Weather Channel.
And a live look now at Key West, Florida, where it is raining there. Some of the initial bands from Eta starting to come in there. Some wind as well, as you see the palm tree blowing there in the distance. Hurricane warning in effect for the Florida Keys with Eta. And conditions are expected to deteriorate this evening. So we want to go back now to meteorologist Jen Carfagno. She is in Key Largo right now with a closer look at conditions. And Jen, we just looked at Key West, Key Largo. You're farther north, a little bit different situation there right now, at the moment anyway.
Yeah. Well, exactly. And Julie, I am on the west side of the island, so the winds we're a little more protected. The winds will not be as strong right now, sort of in the initial stages. But when we get into the thick of it here, we're all going to be feeling those winds, strong tropical storm, if not even hurricane force winds here from Eta. Tropical storm still. The new advisory just came out, winds at 65 miles per hour. It's about 145 miles away from Marathon Key, so just a little farther from us. We have a manatee. Oh, and it's moving. He was sitting right by me. Where I am on Key Largo, in this little cove area that's protected, and there's a lot of boats, but there's also a lot of manatees right in here. And I don't know if you can still see him. He's getting a little deep, and I have trouble seeing him too, especially with the raindrops coming in now and sort of making it a little cloudy on the water. But you know, the fact that the manatees like to hang out here speaks to the fact that this is a good spot actually for the boats to hang out as well. This is a pretty protected area, and I've seen more boats come in since I first came out here earlier this morning. We spent the whole morning actually driving all around Key Largo looking for areas that would best showcase what's happening here today for Tropical Storm Eta. There's some restaurants that are closed, but there's many that are open here. Most businesses that I went by were open as well. And so I think for Key Largo and for a lot of the keys here, it's a kind of hunker down kind of day. Traffic isn't really what you would expect on a Sunday of a weekend. So a lot of people moving out of hotels. There are some evacuations for the area, mainly for the campgrounds, for the RV parks. That's where we do have some of those evacuations that went into effect this morning. Some mobile home parks, low elevation areas. The National Weather Service also put in their hurricane local statement that they're evacuating some of those areas as well. State parks are closed. Businesses, that's up to them really. I saw some restaurants choosing to be closed, and they may have done that actually, Carl, just because of course not as many people would be out and about today. It's really just a good way to encourage everyone to just hunker down, wait this out. It's coming through tonight, and by tomorrow afternoon we should see improving conditions here in the Florida Keys. Carl.
Well, just a beautiful place down there, Jen. Thank you so much. And let's take a look at what's going on with the storm right now. And from a satellite perspective, it certainly does not appear to be getting its act together right now, which is not to say that it won't become more organized as it gets closer to the Keys. That is possible. We do think that the shear is going to be lessening, but there is very strong wind that is now coming into the circulation, and that makes it very difficult for a tropical cyclone to become more organized, to build more thunderstorms about that center of circulation. And unless you see that, you're not going to see intensification. So certainly, at least right now, we're in sort of a holding pattern in terms of intensification. So that is some good news. Now, let's talk about radar. And we've got this larger band around the center of the storm, and you can see some of that, although breaking up, is beginning to get closer to South Florida. So as that comes in, we'll see some gusty winds certainly, and then there's the core of the storm, which is coming a little bit more into view here. Sorry about that, a little bit more into view on the radar, and that is where we're going to see probably the strongest winds as that comes in. But the wind extending well off to the north, well up the coast, because it's not just about the tropical system. It's also about the gradient between the system and a strong high that is off to the north. So right now, winds gusting to 30 miles per hour in Fort Lauderdale. As these bands come in and we see heavier showers and the stronger wind that is aloft gets transferred down to the ground, we could very easily see winds gusting 40, 50, maybe 60 miles per hour. That's going to be more likely this evening and then through the overnight and into tomorrow. Winds now, look at that, most recently in a shower that just came through, 52 miles per hour in West Palm. So this is well out ahead of the main part of this storm. So, it's just going to be a very gusty, very wet period through tonight and through tomorrow, and really only begins to improve on Tuesday. And so rainfall to come, widespread amounts of 3 to 5 inches, but easily over that in some spots. Julie, over to you.
Yeah, and Carl, we could see some severe weather as well with this system as it does come on shore. So we are looking at a Torcon of a 2 tomorrow here in South Florida. So a 2 on the scale out of 10, but still looking at the possibility of some brief spin-ups, as they like to call these during hurricanes. But the right front quadrant is really where we would be most likely to see any severe weather activity. That's usually where we have the strongest winds in a hurricane. And so with that spin there in place, looking at the potential at least for perhaps some tornadoes. And those tornadoes will be very difficult to see, by the way, with all of the rain that is coming in as well. So we will be looking at the potential for that. That is just a heads up for you if you live in South Florida, timing it out as the storm gets closer and closer. Again, bringing that pouring rain with the gusty winds and the potential for tornadoes. Not out of the question. Winds and rain right now roaring across South Florida. Those gusts in Miami getting up to over 40 miles an hour. Eta has triggered alerts, including a tropical storm warning for the area. Tropical storm Eta bringing squally weather to South Florida today, but the threats, well, they're going to be ongoing throughout the week. We're talking about wind, we're talking about rain, and perhaps a very long-lived system if it does make its way into the Gulf of Mexico. So we're going to be breaking it down this half hour, why we need to watch Eta through the week. I'm meteorologist Julie Martin. Here's what we know right now. Hurricane and storm surge warnings are issued for the Florida Keys and the Florida Bay. Florida governor declares a state of emergency for South Florida counties. Monroe County officials urge people to take shelter in the Florida Keys. So yeah, we want to get the very latest on Eta right now. Carl, right now it's not looking all that great on the satellite imagery, but that doesn't mean things couldn't change.
No, that's right. And in fact, the models do indicate that there will be some more organization later today, and I'll show you that here in a moment. Winds now gusting to 38 miles per hour in West Palm. We just had a gust of 52 miles per hour and now 35 in Naples. So this is the kind of thing that we'll see through the rest of the day today, and the kind of thing that's only going to step up. Winds gusting 50, 60 most likely in Miami tonight and overnight. There you see a band of showers that just came through in West Palm. So if you're following the radar in your area, when those bands come through, that's when the winds are going to get a lot stronger. The winds are much stronger off the ground, way up in the atmosphere. And so as the bands come through, they can transfer some of that stronger wind aloft down to the ground. So that's the kind of thing that you can expect through the day today, where it's sort of on and off. You're getting buffeted by these bands and some really gusty winds as they come through. And you look at the larger picture, and you can see that there is a little more structure to the south. We do see a large, not quite an eye wall, but a large ring of storms there. It's not, though. We do think the shear is gradually going to lessen up a little bit. And here you see a model forecast showing you a little more organization in that core as it's coming towards Miami-Dade and Monroe counties. And so that would certainly imply some much stronger wind with that banding that's coming in. Again, 50, 60 miles per hour, maybe even gusting to hurricane force at times. Then in the overnight, we see some of that stronger wind coming across the state and more towards Fort Myers and Cape Coral there, and then beginning to move away into Monday afternoon. But an important part of this is it's not just the storm. There's a very large area of strong winds well to the north associated with the difference in pressure between the low and the high. So those tropical storm force winds well away from that core and extending all the way up to the Space Coast. This is the National Hurricane Center forecast for 11 o'clock tonight. So you can see most of the southern part of the state, southern nearly half of the state getting in on those tropical storm force winds between tonight and early tomorrow. And then we may be looking at even some hurricane force winds coming through the lower part of the Keys there, depending on what happens exactly with the storm. And we want to go now to Jen Carfagno. She's been reporting on the storm in the Keys for us. And Jen, of course, a very vulnerable area there with nothing but frictionless wind coming off the water and into the Keys.
Well, exactly, Carl. And, when we were trying to decide where we would go to show the storm, we were looking at the east side versus the west side. And it's like there's not much actually to protect you on either side, because we just have just a skinny little strip of land surrounded by water. There's a lot of little inlets and canals all throughout the Keys. Look, this is a community that loves their water. They love their boats here. And certainly you love the water on a good day, but on a day when there's a hurricane, you're watching it very warily. We are under a hurricane warning. And as far as I can tell, this is the first hurricane warning that we have been under in Monroe County here in the Florida Keys since Hurricane Irma in 2017. Now, this is going to be a completely different situation here, so I want to make sure anyone who went through Irma knows that, but you still have to prepare. And as I drove around town this morning in Key Largo, I didn't see anyone boarding up, but I didn't see a lot of people out either. So I think people are taking this seriously, just kind of, waiting this one out. It is going to be fairly quick coming through. I mean, we've got this extended period of gustier winds, but the worst of the weather will be coming through overnight tonight. Now, you can see behind me that we do have some breezy conditions, but this is not, I think, representative of what we are going to be feeling here. The winds will be ramping up. We'll be having stronger tropical storm force gusts all through the evening, and then ramping up potentially to hurricane force overnight before it moves through the Florida Straits.
Next up.
Welcome back. Taking a live look now at Vero Beach, Florida, and there we can see the winds certainly have picked up there. The sky darkening in a bit as well. Of course, we are following Eta right now. Multiple threats in Florida, including right here in Vero Beach, a flood watch and a high surf advisory, and winds gusting up to 30 miles per hour. But we could certainly see hurricane force wind gusts coming in later on tonight into tomorrow. So we take a look here at where we are at the moment with Eta. It's currently a 65-mile-per-hour storm coming off the coast of Cuba, still about 145 miles to the southeast of Marathon, Florida, but it's moving to the north-northwest at around 17 miles per hour. So those impacts are going to be ongoing now throughout the afternoon and evening and into the overnight hours here in South Florida. By this evening, we are looking at potentially a 70-mile-per-hour storm, so a bit of a stronger storm now coming into the Keys here, eventually really just working its way, though, perhaps back out even into the Gulf of Mexico, where it could then again strengthen and really impact the west coast of Florida throughout much of the week. So something we're going to be watching. The wind field with this is incredibly large, so those tropical storm force winds are going to be felt here, not just in places like the Keys or Miami-Dade, but certainly even as we get as far north as Tampa, Sarasota, by the time we get into maybe late Monday into Tuesday, feeling those tropical storm force winds as well. So we do have our watches and warnings up here. We do have a tropical storm warning in red. That does include Miami, Fort Lauderdale, all the way up to Titusville. And then a tropical storm watch when we get into some of those southern counties of the Tampa Bay area. So, Carl, looks like we still have a long way to go with this one, but right now, things are just getting started.
Yeah, that's right. And, if you think about the optimal environment for a tropical cyclone, you need a lot of humid air all the way around, and then you also need lighter winds aloft. Well, that is not what we're seeing right now, and you can see that very clearly in this imagery. This is water vapor imagery, so we're looking at the moisture in the mid and upper levels of the atmosphere, and clearly the middle and upper atmosphere is very, very dry coming into the west and south side of the tropical storm right now, and there's also stronger wind aloft associated with the big upper low. That's the big U-shaped feature showing up right in there. So this thing is very much tangled up with the upper low right now, and that's a big part of why it is certainly not intensifying right now. That's not to say that it won't a little bit later today or early tomorrow. We do think that that shear is going to begin to relax some, though the dry air is still going to be lurking around. The question after that is, what's going to happen once it gets into the eastern Gulf? Now, here is a depiction of the upper level pattern. And so you see first of all, the high pressure off to the northeast there in red. That's this area. That's what's keeping it from driving to the north and pushing it to the west. And then also a big weather system out in the western part of the country. That's eventually going to come in and overtake this thing. In the meantime, though, the storm is going to move past the Keys tonight and tomorrow. Then it moves into this area where there's very light wind aloft. And so assuming that there's not too much dry air to get involved in the system and kill off the thunderstorms, it's going to be in an environment where it actually could strengthen for a period of time, But then as that system comes in from the west, watch what happens with the upper winds. Very strong upper winds start to drive in, start to shear the system, and that will kill it off as it moves towards the coast, most likely, unless it has already gotten more towards the coast. And that, too, is an open question. So you look at the intensity model guidance here, and there are several models that do take it to hurricane intensity. The one that gets it up to Category 3, really an outlier. Most of the evidence, I think, is right around, Category 1 or perhaps just a little below that. So, we'll continue to watch it. But again, if conditions were optimal and it could fend off that dry air, then, then maybe it could get a good bit stronger. But you notice also, Julie, that as the storm is going to be taken off to the northeast, where it is before that move occurs has everything to do with where it's going to end up. And again, as it is moving northeast, it's going to be sheared at the same time. So it's probably going to be weakening. But, these are still, very difficult questions, and we'll just have to watch it through the week.
Yeah, it could be a very long week there for Floridians. And South Florida bracing for the heavy rain as people prepare right here in Miami. You can see them out sandbagging ahead of the storm. The area is already 18 inches above rainfall for the year. So they're, again, going to be doing what they can to keep those floodwaters out of businesses and homes. So, yeah, Florida has gotten a lot of rain already this year and certainly going to be getting what could be another half a foot or so coming into South Florida in the coming days. So we're timing out. This would be our tropical storm force winds. You'll notice how large this wind field is. They're really going to be impacting millions of us here throughout South Florida as it does come in and continues to produce those gusty winds. We're talking about Naples, West Palm Beach, all the way back down to the Keys by late Monday, and then late Sunday rather, looking at Monday, maybe even some hurricane force winds in the southern Keys there as well. So we will see conditions start to improve as this thing pulls away later on Monday night. But then again, as Carl was mentioning, into the Gulf of Mexico it goes. And then we will have to watch and wait and see just how close it does get to the west coast of Florida and what those impacts might be. And all of those factors are very important, some of those little things that could make all the difference. So we're going to keep tracking it for you here at the Weather Channel right after this. New video into the Weather Channel. Right now, heavy rain and gusty winds sweeping across South Florida ahead of Eta. Here's a look at the flooding scene unfolding right now in Miami. Some vehicles are driving through flooded streets, something we don't recommend you do, by the way. They don't need the rain here. They're already above average for rain totals so far this year, well above average there in South Florida. Plenty more rain, though, to come with Eta. Could see maybe 5-6 inches or more, Carl, in South Florida, so that's not what we need.
Not at all, and there are flood watches now all across South Florida and then right across Alligator Alley and into the western part of South Florida as well. And you take a look at this soil moisture. This is a big part of this. How much water is in the ground, and in South Florida in particular, there's a lot of water in the ground right now, so that's going to make it that much easier for there to be flash flooding. And over the last 2 days, we've had well over 3 inches of rain in parts of Broward County in particular, so that would be one of the spots where I'd be really worried about fast rising water in those canals and on the streets. You see that there's been, basically showers, embedded thunder, coming through over the last several hours here, but there's this big mass of rain that has yet to move in. And as that comes in later tonight, I do think it's going to get a lot more ugly. We're likely to see flash flood warnings there in South Florida, as well as across and into the southwest part of the state. So here's a model forecast showing you that core of the storm and these waves of more intense rainfall. So the rainfall rates are going to be increasing. And when you've already had a lot of rain and there's already a lot of water in the ground, when the rates get higher, when you start getting into 2 to 3 inches per hour, that's when you get really worried about flash flooding. So I think that is what's on the way tonight. You notice that broadly we're looking for 3 to 5 inches of rain, but pockets of 5 to 8. We can't rule out maybe some double-digit rainfall, and most of that is going to be concentrated on South Florida, but also the Keys and also into the southwestern part of the state. And there you see the flash flood potential going through tomorrow morning. Julie?
All right, we take a look at the flood factor, really, and why we worry about places like Tampa. If the storm does impact Tampa, once it gets back into the Gulf of Mexico later this week, we look at a place like Tampa, very flat area, so not a lot of topography here. And then the soil as well, it's not always the greatest when it comes to drainage. Water really can travel faster through the sandy soil. So if you get moderate rain, it's not bad. It can kind of filter that and kind of handle that. But if you get those excessive rainfall rates, as Carl was mentioning, it's hard to keep up with it. So that intense rain can still cause that flash flooding. It happens a lot during tropical systems, during the rainy season as well. So that is just something to keep in mind. And also keep this in mind. We've already picked up a ton of rain here in Florida for the year. Miami, you're running almost 20 inches above average. Fort Lauderdale, over 20 inches. West Palm, Vero Beach, and Key West, all way above average for the year. So don't need any more rainfall really coming in, but unfortunately, Eta's going to bring it. And we could see, of course, as we're already starting to see in places like Miami, those streets starting to flood. And we're going to be running into some problems, I think, throughout the next couple of days, particularly in South Florida, Carl.
Well, Julie, we wanted to talk about where we've been so far this year, looking at the season to date. And I want to show you some of the numbers that have come in. They are pretty remarkable. We've had 28 named storms, and that is closing in on 3 times the average between 1981 and 2010. We've had 12 hurricanes, nearly double the average. We've had 5 Category 3 or higher storms, nearly double the average. And when you look at ACE, that's accumulated cyclone energy. That's the total amount of wind that all the storms have produced. Well, it's about 50% higher than average. So, what that implies relative to those other numbers is a lot of those storms have been weaker, but still we've had an awful lot of activity. And at least a part of this conversation has to be what's going on with the oceans. You look at ocean temperatures relative to average. In blue there, you see temperatures that are below average. In yellow and orange, you see temperatures that are above average. And just about the entire Atlantic Basin is still above average. And when you've got that much warmth, that much energy in the oceans, it's not a surprise that we see more activity. And boy, it's been just nonstop. There's a look at the days on which we've had tropical storms. And so it's been a really, really busy season here. And taking a look at some of the landfalls, 11 landfalls in the U.S. altogether. And that is a new record. The previous record was 9 landfalls in a given season back in 1916. Let's get back out to Jen right now, and she's in the Florida Keys for us. Jen?
Yeah, and what's wild, Carl, is none of those landfalls were in Florida. So Eta could be the first landfall of the 2020 season here in Florida. We've got this really strong east wind that's going to be with us all day, ramping up through tropical storm force and potentially a hurricane through this evening and overnight.
Hi, everyone, and welcome into our special extended live coverage of Tropical Storm Eta. I'm meteorologist Julie Martin, joined in studio by our storm specialist, Carl Parker. We'll get to Carl in just a minute. First, though, a hurricane warning now in effect for parts of the Florida Keys, Key West, feeling some of Eta's effects of rain and wind. A live look there now. You can see the flags blowing at a good clip. But more bad weather to come here in the Keys and certainly throughout much of South Florida over the next 24 hours or so. We take a look here at where we are currently with Eta, a 65-mile-per-hour storm moving off to the northwest at 17 off the coast of Cuba right now. So it's still about 145 miles southeast of Marathon, Florida. But certainly the impacts are going to be felt throughout the rest of the afternoon, tonight into tomorrow here in South Florida. By this evening, maybe strengthening to a 70-mile-per-hour storm as it impacts the Keys and portions of South Florida. Then perhaps makes its way back into the Gulf of Mexico, and that's when things could get interesting as well, and we could be dealing with this for days here in Florida. But right now, we do want to check in with Jen. She is in the Florida Keys right now getting ready for Eta, and current conditions, I think you said they've been kind of hit or miss out throughout the day.
They really have been, Julie. We actually had some squallier weather, if you will, overnight last night. Woke me up with the rain and the wind, and also this morning. Now today we've been in and out of kind of this light rain. It seems like the big plume of moisture is centered right over South Florida, with Fort Lauderdale being in the worst of it, and then well off to the south with a core of what is Tropical Storm Eta. So I'm here in Key Largo. It's about 140 miles away or so from us here. And as we watch its approach here to the Florida Keys overnight, know that, you know, the Florida Keys, it's a long string of islands, I think something like 44 different islands, and 113 miles from Key Largo all the way down to Key West. So, you know, if Eta moves all the way down through the South Keys, the Southern Keys, the lower Keys as they call them, you know, it's potential that we would only see maybe some tropical storm force. But if it was closer to us here in Key Largo, we could get into this hurricane force gust, which of course is why we are in that hurricane warning. Let me set the stage. I'm actually on the west side of Key Largo, and the east side is going to have some stronger winds today just because of that very persistent, uninterrupted east flow. The west side happens to be a little more protected, and this is a good spot for these boats to ride out the tropical storm, or if it becomes a hurricane. So right out here in this cove, I've seen more boats actually come in since earlier this morning, and this is a good spot really just to be a little bit more protective in this sort of these cove or sound areas right here. Now overall though, we are expecting winds to ramp up, and here I think, you know, by the time we get into the meat of it, the thick of it overnight, everyone will have that potential for those strong winds coming in from the east, tropical storm force gusts. You can see in the trees a little bit sometimes, you know, just blowing. At the moment, the winds are fairly light. And so, you know, luckily, for the bulk of the day, it's been an in or out kind of thing with the wind and not as persistent as it really could be. But certainly preparations are being made. There are some evacuations, some of the campgrounds, the RV parks, those are being evacuated. State parks are closed. Monroe County schools are closed, both in session and virtual as well tomorrow, so kids have that. But there are shelters open at some schools, like the high school in Key West, Marathon, and Coral Shores, and they are all pet friendly too, so you can take your pets there in terms of if you need a safe place to shelter out. And Carl, hurricane warning here. I believe that's the first hurricane warning for Monroe County for the Florida Keys since Irma in 2017.
Yeah, it's been a long time, and really interesting looking at the trends right now on the satellite picture. We'll have to see if we do in fact get anything like that later tonight. Right now, it's 65-mile-per-hour tropical storm moving north-northwest at 17. And, you know, you look at the satellite here, and the presentation is not at all impressive right now. We know the storm has been undergoing some wind shear. We know there's a lot of dry air wrapping around the south side, and even now it appears around the east side and maybe even getting right into the core. You notice those brighter colors, the yellow and the orange, the red. You see how all of that is contracting in the loop there? That's telling you that those thunderstorms in the core of the storm are dying off right now. So at least for now, it is absolutely not strengthening, and if anything is maybe weakening a little bit, and let's hope that that continues to be the case. But you never want to count a tropical system out because they can always bounce back when things improve a little bit. Sometimes some dry air will get in, and for a time it looks like it's not doing very well, and then it starts to fend that off, and new thunderstorms develop, and the shear is also expected to lessen some tonight. So certainly we could see it ramping back up in intensity as the storm approaches. You never want to count it out, but at least for now, that is an encouraging trend. We see some showers, bands kind of wrapping around the center there, and then a lot of wet weather coming in. And winds now pretty gusty in many spots. So winds gusting to 21 Key West, 31 in Miami. And as you get farther north, we're actually seeing even stronger wind in West Palm and in Stewart. Winds there gusting to 43 miles per hour. So this is not just about the core of the storm. There's also a strong high to the north. It's the conjunction of those two systems that's going to bring us wind all the way up the Florida coast. So here's one high-resolution model, and this model does show that there is some drier air getting into the system, but it also shows a little more organization to that center. So it could very well be that the shear begins to relax, and we do see a little more of a core developing on the radar picture. And if that were to be the case, it would absolutely bring some very strong wind in. We could be talking about winds gusting 50, 60 miles per hour in Miami-Dade and Monroe counties this evening. That would continue through late night into the overnight hours and then into the early morning as well. Still a very strong onshore flow from there and on northward. And then finally the storm beginning to pull away as we get into tomorrow afternoon. A lot of rain with the system. That really doesn't change regardless of what the intensity is. So certainly flash flooding will be an issue. There is potential for hurricane force winds, tropical storm force winds all the way up to the Space Coast. And, again, that is a function of this contrast in pressure between the low pressure with the tropical storm and the high pressure off to the north. There's a very steep, what we call pressure gradient between those two, and that allows for all of this wind to exist well away from that center. So, even as the center is coming across the Keys late tonight, we see a huge area of strong winds across much of central and south Florida, especially along the East Coast where it's coming in off the ocean. There's no friction. That goes into tomorrow morning and then begins to relent on Tuesday. Then, of course, the question is, what is the storm going to do after that? We think there's a good chance that it is going to get more organized, but it may become a lot less organized right as it's coming onshore. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a few minutes. Julie, over to you.
And Carl, you mentioned that large wind field, and we take a look here at the tropical storm force winds. This is timing this out for you, starting the clock at 3 o'clock this afternoon, and you'll notice just how wide this area is. So those winds, as Carl mentioned, are going to be felt on the east coast of Florida as well as the west coast. So this is going to be the situation about midnight tonight, looking at tropical storm force winds throughout south and portions of central Florida at this point, and then continuing on but stretching out at least 125 miles or so from the storm center. So a lot of you will be definitely dealing with the gusty conditions throughout the night into the overnight and even throughout the day tomorrow before the system starts to pull away a bit and we will see conditions improve. This is Tuesday, where we will see things quiet down as the storm is in the Gulf of Mexico. So likely arrival times here. Again, this evening, we will expect to feel those tropical storm force winds in the Florida Keys and through Miami as well. By the time we get into Monday morning, it crawls up the coast, the west coast of Florida a little bit more. Naples, you'll be feeling it eventually even up in through Tampa Bay by the time we hit Tuesday night. Expecting to feel those tropical storm force winds there. So Miami, for you, the hit or miss storms continuing on in through Monday and Tuesday. We're still going to stay a little bit gusty here, mind you, even after the system moves away. So 20 to 25 mile per hour wind gusts here coming your way for even Tuesday and through Wednesday, Thursday. So a windy week, a wet week here throughout much of Florida as well. And when we talk about rainfall, this is what we don't need. We've already got plenty of rain here in South Florida so far this year, but could see as much as 4, 5, 6 inches of rain coming in with this particular system. Well, the Fort Lauderdale area is also preparing for Eta. Our Chris Bruin shows us what's happening there.
Heavy bursts of rain kind of come and go. We've been in these squalls all night and all morning and now afternoon here in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, where rainfall totals are really starting to rack up. Already upwards of 4 to 5 inches in Broward County, at least parts of it. And we've got a lot more rain to have to contend with, so expect more of the same. In fact, gusts getting even stronger and those winds picking up more persistent bands as we head through the overnight and evening hours. When we talk about urban flooding, this is what we mean. Take a look right here. This isn't that serious, at least at the time being, but it shows you kind of a low-lying spot on the sidewalk where that water collects. The problem is the rainfall rates. When you talk about tropical systems, you end up with 1 to 2 inch or more per hour rainfall rates. 10 minutes, that's manageable, but when it lasts for over an hour or so, you run into problems. So while the roads here, for the most part, they're drivable, you have issues when you end up with those types of rainfall rates for, say, an hour or more's time. So that means roads like this become flooded with ponding on the road. And that's what we've seen around Fort Lauderdale already, and expect that to worsen with those flood watches in effect. Winds will also be a factor. They get very strong. We get those tropical storm force gusts as those squalls come in, but expect those winds to steadily increase, especially overnight tonight and throughout the day tomorrow with more persistent rain bands, and the core of Eta gets closer to the Keys in South Florida and even re-strengthens potentially and reorganizes its overall structure. We'll continue with the latest updates here, not only from Fort Lauderdale, but all across Southeast Florida and the Keys coming up.
Thanks, Chris. And some models have shifted Eta's cone more to Florida's western side, putting places like Tampa more in the storm's path. Rain and gusty winds up to 30 miles per hour may be coming in today, and then that's going to set the stage for a very stormy week ahead thanks to Eta. Right now, looking okay there for you, Tampa, but the weather is definitely going to be a factor, I think, for Tampa later on this week as well, Carl.
Yeah, there's no question that we're going to get in on some weather. The question is just how much weather are we going to see? And that has everything to do with the intensity and where the storm is going to go. Now, right now, it is very firmly tangled up with an upper level low. That's this big U-shaped feature that's coming across parts of the Gulf and also the Caribbean. So there's stronger wind aloft with that. That's where the wind shear is coming from. There's also drier air in the mid and upper levels of the atmosphere. That is the orange coloring right there. Those are both things that tropical systems don't like. And so that is why we're seeing a little bit less in the way of activity around the core of the storm right now. We can hope that that is a trend that holds. And then here you see the longer term outlook, and we're going to actually watch that stronger wind begin to back away a little bit. The storm's going to move out into the Gulf, and then you'll notice that we've got a high pressure off to the north here, by the way. That's what's driving this thing off to the west. You notice that that strong upper level wind actually goes away into Tuesday and Wednesday of next week. So the remaining question is how much of that dry air is lingering and how much is that bothering the system? But there's going to be a period where there is at least not wind shear. That'll be the case until later in the week. By the time we get into Thursday, once again, we see some stronger winds approaching, and that will quickly weaken the storm as it is driving the storm farther inland. So, there's going to be a little window for it to get stronger, and that's reflected in some of the intensity guidance here. It looks like we just got some new guidance in some of the models, and not all of them. I'm not sure why that is the case. We'll check on this for you, but the idea is that basically it could become a hurricane as it moves out into the Gulf. And then when you look at the guidance, the track guidance, where it's going to go, you see it sort of all over the place because it is going to be in this area of very light steering flow. So how far to the west is it going to drift before it is taken off to the northeast by that system that is coming in from the west? If it doesn't go very far to the west and then it starts to move into the northeast or to the northeast and into Florida, well, that is going to increase the chances that we get more weather along the west coast of Florida. In Tampa and Bradenton and Sarasota and all of those areas, you'll get more weather. And then gradually starts to move up. You'll also notice that we see some weather on the east side, but not on the west side. So that is indicating that dry air that could still be bothering the system. And then by the time we get into Friday, there are not nearly as many of these circles. You see the circles early on here. I'm going to go back just a little bit. See all those concentric circles right in there? Okay, that's still a pretty formidable storm at that time, and then they all begin to loosen up. And that implies that the low is weakening, and it will continue to weaken as it's being sheared and taken off to the north. So it's complicated, Julie, but it could well be that after this initial period over the next couple of days, we don't see that much weather in the long run onshore.
We hope so.
Yeah.
Well, this part of the country doesn't need any more rain, and the flooding in Big Pine Key happened today here. Taking a look at that right now, while Eta still spins just off the coast of Cuba right now at a 65-mile-per-hour storm. Expected to possibly intensify a little bit and maybe reach hurricane strength. But we do know that it's going to bring rain, right? So flood watches are up for South Florida in through much of Central Florida as well. And we could see as much as 5-6 inches or more of rain come into some of these already really saturated areas for the year. Here is Eta right now. These are some of the initial outer bands coming in right now to South Florida and in through the Keys, kind of intermittent, as Jen has been telling us in places like Key Largo throughout the day today. But certainly looking at plenty more to come and watching out for the flood factor.
Easy at worst, really, for us in the last hour. But earlier this morning, we had some stronger wind gusts, and those strong winds are going to ramp up once we get a closer approach from Eta. You know, it is a tropical storm, winds 65 miles per hour, but we are expecting that possibility of it strengthening to a hurricane. That's why we're under hurricane warning. We're expecting some heavy rainfall along with the risk of surge. Surge will be running about 2 to 4 feet, but especially on the eastern side. I'm here on the western side, and actually during Irma, this water, just because of the push of water, this water is all pushed out and it got really low because of the strong winds. And so this is actually a pretty good place for these boats to hang out, which is why they're here to ride out this storm. And Carl, you know, this is obviously not going to be an Irma, but it could be a hurricane, and we could see an extended period of very strong winds overnight tonight. So people just need to be ready for that. You know, it's a time to stay inside, make sure you have your flashlights and everything powered up, and be ready for that potential. Carl?
Yeah, you know, certainly we're seeing some encouraging trends on satellite right now, but as you and I both know, storms can turn around very quickly, and so we do want to stay on our toes with this one. But right now, a 65-mile-per-hour tropical storm and moving north-northwest at 17. You look at the satellite imagery, and you can pretty clearly see what's going on here. Notice, first of all, the absence of cloud on the south side and even wrapping around on the east side. That is drier air, and drier air kills off thunderstorms, and you can certainly see that. And also, the storm is being sheared, and you can certainly see that the thunderstorms at the core of the storm there have really just collapsed over the last couple of hours. Now, that's very, very encouraging. It doesn't mean that it's going to last. However, storms can turn around very quickly. We've seen it 1,000 times. And if it can start to fend off that dry air, if the wind shear lessens a little bit, it could very well become more organized as it is coming towards the Keys and towards Miami-Dade County later today. But at least for now, this is a very encouraging trend to see the thunderstorms die off like this. Now, you've got a large area of heavy rain that's coming through. That could end up being one of the biggest impacts from the storm. We're looking at widespread 3, 4, 5-inch amounts coming down here over the next 24 hours. And already waves of rain have been coming through. We've had up 4 or 5 inches in Broward County, and maybe as much as that coming going forward. Winds now gusting to 35 in Miami, picking up a little bit in the Keys, now gusting to 25 in Marathon. Farther north, winds gusting to 43 in Stewart and West Palm. So even well north of the center of the storm, we're seeing some very strong wind. That is due to the interaction with the storm that is high pressure, rather, that is off to the north, a weather system that's off to the north. And so certainly it's going to be gusty all the way up the coast. Now, here's a high resolution model, and I want you to notice what it does with the core of the storm here. So as the storm gets a little bit closer, starting to show more organization about that core and more thunderstorms developing about that core. And, you know, so while we can't say for sure that that is definitely going to happen, it certainly is a possibility. It's entirely possible that the storm does start to fend off the dry air, and it does start to feel a little less shear, and it does become more organized. And if that is the case, and it brings in this banding about the core like that in the Keys and Miami-Dade, it is going to be hairy. There's no doubt about it. We'll see winds of 50, 60 miles per hour, maybe even gusting to hurricane force. We'll see very intense rainfall rates. So it'll be tough tonight in those areas, and overnight and even into tomorrow morning. Still seeing a very strong onshore flow tomorrow morning. Then the storm's starting to pull away as we go into late Monday and also into Tuesday. Julie, over to you.
And with Eta could come some severe weather as well. So we do have a Torcon of 2 up here for South Florida. This would be a 2 on a level out of 10 here. So with hurricanes, tropical systems, a lot of times we do see at least brief spin-ups come on shore, and certainly they're very difficult to catch because it's raining so hard and already very windy. Where they do like to form would be that right front quadrant of the tropical entity, and that's usually where the stronger winds are. and that is where we would typically see them start to form. So coming in here from the east, certainly a heads up for you, something else to be aware of. Could see at least some brief spin-ups with this.
Thanks, man.
New video right now showing the kinds of conditions Tropical Storm Eta is bringing to South Florida. Just like we're seeing here, we do expect those gusty winds and the rain well outside Eta's cone. So the threats from our latest tropical system are far from over. This half hour, we're going to break down why we need to watch Eta through the week. I'm meteorologist Julie Martin. Here's what we know right now. Hurricane and storm surge warnings are issued for the Florida Keys and the Florida Bay. Florida's governor declares a state of emergency for South Florida counties. Monroe County officials are urging people to take shelter in the Florida Keys. So we do want to get the very latest now on Eta, where it's headed. And Carl, we know that this is one that could be lingering for the most of the week here and impacting maybe Florida in some way.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very complicated situation, that's for sure. We are seeing some encouraging trends here on the satellite imagery. And you notice, by the way, there's a lot of dry air and also wind shear getting into the system there. And so that is helping us out, at least right now in the short term. It is a 65-mile-per-hour storm officially, but, I'll tell you, it is definitely not strengthening right now. And if anything, it is weakening right now. We're seeing just a collapse of thunderstorms about that center. And that's how tropical systems work. You get thunderstorms developing about the center, and as they continue to become more robust, they pull in more warm and humid air. And as we get thunderstorms developing, that releases latent heat and pulls in even more air, and that allows it to get stronger. So it's a big heat engine, and it's reliant on the presence of those thunderstorms about the center. If you don't have that, you're absolutely not going to see strengthening, and it's entirely possible that we see weakening as well. So at least right now, with that much waning of the convection, things are looking a little bit better. The question is, will it hold? Will it continue to be that way?